Welcome, everyone, to Season 2, Episode 38 of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. And if this is your first time, you can catch all the previous episodes on YouTube. Baseline's YouTube channel is Baseline Web Training, all one word on YouTube. So when you search for it, make sure you don't leave any spaces. Baseline Web Training, all the previous Tech Talk Tuesdays are there, plus lots of other helpful how-to information, which I'm always sending out to people: how to connect your controller, how to create an account, how to set a program. All that kind of stuff is available on YouTube. Today, we are going to be doing what we call Ask Us Anything, which means you can ask us questions live here during our chat. We have about 12 or so that came to us in advance. And we really want to thank you for that, because part of Tech Talk Tuesday is trying to, as funny as it sounds, engage with you, get your feedback, get your ideas, your thoughts. What are you thinking about? How can we help you? What are you struggling with? And so having these questions sent to us in advance is really helpful, and we haven't edited them at all. So you're going to see the questions. We don't have any names tied to them. Hopefully, if you've asked a question, you're with us today, so you can listen to the response. And we haven't really canned any of these responses. We're just, the three of us are just going to kind of chat in real time about them. And so before we do that, let's do quick introductions. I'm Andy Humphrey, Irrigation Technology Consultant. We have Dan Conger, our Training Manager, and Chris Wright, our VP of Sales. Chris has a slide deck which has the question, so all of you can see the question that we'll be talking about. So I think Chris should lead us off with the slide deck.
All right. So before we jump into them, I just want to say that this is one of my favorite episode types that we do. We've done it a couple of times before. Always had really good engagement, and I'm really impressed with the number of questions that came in previously, by virtue of the email that we sent out, because it gave us, a good structure of what we can talk about today. So what we're doing here on Tech Talk Tuesday is about building a community of Baseline users and Baseline influencers, so that they feel comfortable and engaged and part of the Baseline culture and community. And we want to continue that, especially going into Season 3, as we're approaching the end of Season 2. So let's get started. Let me share my screen. And
I'll just mention while Chris is bringing this up, if you have thoughts about what we're talking about, or if you maybe have a different answer, or if you have a question that we're not talking about, but you want to put on the table, so if there's enough time, we can answer it at the end, please share.
For sure. All right. Do you see the slide deck?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So questions came in, and we didn't arrange them in any particular order or by any kind of product type or grouping. So they're just as they came into us. So question number 1, is there any chance of increasing the controller and mainline capacity of the flow station and creating a virtual flow station so its features can be accessed in the cloud rather than through physical hardware? Great question. That's a good lead off for sure.
It's awesome, because if you think about the power of the flow station, it is, 10x more powerful than your everyday site needs, which is sort of points back to your first slide there, which is Baseline engineered solutions, really going to utilize the full capacity of the flow station. It's because you're engineering, for lack of a better word, a big friggin' irrigation system.
Yeah. So maybe the best question right now, or to define, is what is the current capacity of a flow station?
Right. Yep.
Well, I think you could even back up to the controller, right? The controller, because I've run into people that don't use the full capacity of a 3200 controller with eight water sources, 8 control points, and 8 main lines. So that's pretty significant. So going beyond that, we need the flow station.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. So if we were to define the support capacity of a flow station currently, it'll support 20 base station 3200 controllers and up to 40 individual main lines. And then it allows those controllers to share main lines, share water sources, share control points, etc., so that it will enhance the operation of the system.
Yeah. So if there are more projects out there that are more than 20 controllers, yes, please sign us up. I don't know that we have that type of information to let us know that, hey, we need a bigger capacity, because quite frankly, from my opinion or my experience, not my opinion, my experience, I'm not seeing these projects come in every day that would say, hey, let's go engineer a bigger system. So,
but we do know that those systems exist. And yes, there is a chance of increasing the controller capacity for a flow station. And there's also a chance of making a virtual and putting it in the cloud. So great question. Something that's definitely on our radar. And like Andy said, if you got projects that would exceed the capacity of a current flow station, make sure to contact your RSM so that we can help you engineer that solution to make it work properly.
And that's kind of how engineering or product management looks at it too. They're like, well, how many inquiries did we have this year? Okay, is that enough need to build out a bigger, is that enough need to put more engineering resources in that direction?
Definitely.
Because it can be done. It's just, is there the need for it?
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Very good. We good on question number one? All right. Let's go to 2. We've got, this is kind of a contextual or scenario question. So Andy, why don't you kind of set the stage for the questions that follow?
And this was prefaced with they knew that this was potentially a graduate level question. And I would say, yes, it has potential to be a graduate level question. I think that when we get to the end of this, you'll see how perhaps baseline technology can make something that seems graduate level more every day, so to speak. So let's just read this quickly, and then we'll move to the real question. I am running a rotor head system, 100 GPM per head, 1 head per valve, 4 valves total, on a booster pump system and flow sensor with a 15,000 gallon reservoir. Topography allows me to capture the runoff, which is 25% of the flow. Captured runoff will re-enter the reservoir from a separate 500 gallon reservoir tank with a jockey pump and a flow sensor. So we have 2 reservoirs. Those are, that we know of. Let's move on, Chris.
All right. So this is a great example of an engineered solution.
Yeah. And
for sure,
what we would end up doing is sort of drawing this out and trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but we'll keep going here. So these are the questions based on that statement. Can my baseline controller track original usage and also create a new reservoir balance that is considering the recaptured water re-entering the reservoir? So there are a couple key statements in here. Can we track original water usage? Yes. Because we can put a flow sensor anywhere, right? And at one controller, we could put 8 of them and track whatever water usage that we want. The second part of this is create a balance. Now, what we can't do is math between flow sensors, right? We can't say this flow sensor subtract this flow sensor equals some other number and do something with that other number.
Right. Yeah. So taking the math out of the equation, there is a simpler way that we can manage this, right? And also address the, continuous nature of this process, of this water source as it's operating, as it's happening. So what would be the good, appropriate, functional solution to this scenario?
Right. So instead of crunching math all the time, right? And part of the ask is likely using either other technology or other technologies that exist and how we might do it. But if we remove the math and we just said, we have these tanks, and when one tank reaches X level, we want to either start, stop, or pause that source. Then we have another tank. And when that tank is at any level, we can start, stop, or pause that source. And we could also use the level in one tank to start or stop another tank, right, from filling. And so what we really need to do is look at this in terms of how do we want these tanks to operate? At what level do we want to use each water source? And then use, the pressure transducer. That would be what I would recommend to set those points so that we have a truly, on-demand system that's not actually using math to run, but it is tracking the usage.
And it's in real time, right? Which is the benefit. So we don't have to do the math. So we know based on the pressure transducer values in the tank. We know what the volume of water is in that tank, and we can tell it to create those start, stop, or pause conditions based on that amount of volume. So in this case, baseline moisture sensors in a vertical alignment. So that could be a great level indicator in a tank or in a cistern. But we found that with the ability to read the 4 to 20 milliamp decoder, working with a pressure transducer, it's a much more elegant solution and can be more accurate.
You just have a wider range. So with a sensor, you have 18 inches. Yep. With a pressure transducer, you have the entire depth of the tank.
Right. Yep. You could look at quick view and see that the tank is 50% full, even though it's not going to react until it gets to 10% empty or 10% full.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can equate that amount of volume in that tank based on the depth or on the pressure, on the number of gallons that's available at that pressure level. Right.
Yep.
So, for the asker of that question, if you want to learn more about using the pressure transducer to create the solution, please get in contact with us.
And we did not make this up to make our product look good, by the way. No. This was a real question.
All right. Before we run on to question number 3, I'll address one that came in on the chat. When is baseline upgrading to 5G modem? So we are already there. The 4G LTE modem that we are currently providing with the controllers are 5G compatible. And the cloud network module that we also provide is also 5G compatible. So we are already in the 5G space with cell modems. And as a reminder, it's well known that 3G for AT&T is going down nationally. I believe it's February 22nd of 2022. So the window for 3G is closing quickly, but we are prepared and ready and have 5G capability as of right now. All right, question number 3. When is Baseline going to come up with a smaller controller for high-end residential, light commercial applications? Okay, another great question. So also need to put it into context. Are we coming up with a smaller controller that's smaller than the base station 1000? Because we've already got the 1000 as a platform that is very applicable and used frequently on high-end residential and light commercial. Or are we wanting something even further downstream or down market that would be in plastic, fewer zone count, fewer points of connection capability, et cetera. So,
and I think what makes Baseline so unique in market, right, is all the things that we just sort of talked about in that previous scenario, which sits at the top of the industry, where it really requires more of an engineered solution. And when we are involved with those types of projects that are right in our wheelhouse, the product market value fit is so spot on that we fully realize the further we get away from those projects, like on the fringe, the more we're sort of just into, what would you like? A Hunter, a Rainbird, a Toro, a Weathermatic, a Rachio? What, is it just a web connected controller? And if it is, then, what is really the value? What is it bringing other than a web connected controller that you go to a box store and purchase? If it requires or the site needs all of our other real-time sensing and everything, well, that's really, where we are right now. It really is hard to put into that very low end, smaller, controller.
Yeah. We intentionally have focused on, engineered solutions, say it over and over and over again. But, for those more complex applications that are, typically specified through a design process, perfectly relevant in the design build space, but targeted at the design and specification community.
And we know that we're not going to get every project, and that's okay. We just want to work with the ones that are the best fit for us.
Mm-hmm. And they said smaller controller, but do they mean a cheaper controller? Do they mean
because not enough information really to say there.
Yeah.
Because definitely people will use a lesser zone count and still use a base station 1000 or a base station 3200 for very few zones, but because they want it for the capabilities.
Yeah. And I won't lie, from my perspective, I would love to have a control platform that is more readily sellable over the counter, for instance, at a distributor, or good for that design build contractor or application. We've got it with the 1000 to a degree, but I think there is some opportunity if it doesn't come with increased support, requirement on our part to go a little bit more down market with a smaller, more economical type controller. So good question. Good indicator that, there's a want in market for a baseline controller in that space, which is always good to hear too. All right. Question number 4. Why do my schedules keep changing from timed to moisture sensor low set point, even with none moisture sensor assigned? So, and the none is a term that's straight out of Base Manager, right? So, this one obviously is a good question for tech support. And, we encourage you to, if you can't find the answer in Tech Talk Tuesday, or you can't find the answer on YouTube or whatever, then we do need to engage with tech support. And if there is a problem that is verified, then it needs to go through the escalation process with engineering.
Yep.
To
a couple of things I would think on this. I've never seen this. That doesn't mean it's never happened. And then I tend to like to see, is there a pattern? Has this happened more than once? I would say based on these words, this where it says keep changing. So that tells me maybe it's happened more than once, but I don't know for sure. If it has happened more than once, then I would say, yes, email support@baselinesystems.com and then provide as much information as possible, screen captures, time of when it's happening, what are you doing, as much information as you can share first so that you don't have to go get it after.
Right. Yep. And, just to describe the process that we go through when these come into support and it's validated or verified, and it's like, yes, this is happening. It's happening more than once. Is this an isolated incident, or is it, it happening on other sites? Do we have other inquiries about it? If that's the case, then it goes into an escalation process, and it's validated or discovered within engineering what needs to be done to fix it. So in this case, what firmware version is this controller on? Is it happening at the server level, or is it happening in the controller level? So we need a little bit more information, but we encourage you to connect with tech support in the format that Andy indicated, support@baselinesystems.com, and we can start working on it. Okay. All right.
Nice.
Question number 5. Curious, what is the voltage on your 2-wire, and do you prefer stake or plate grounding?
Awesome.
Right. This sounds like a great question to be answered by our training manager.
Right.
You should be going through this in fundamentals, right?
Yeah. So they're actually two completely separate questions. So let's talk about the voltage on the 2-wire path. So there's a real variance there. And these are conversations that I've had with our engineering. I said, what's the number in which, and it turns out there's a lot more to it than just this hard number. The voltage on our 2-wire path is closer to 30 volts. It exceeds 24 volts, but it's somewhere between 24 and 30, depending upon what's going on with your system at a particular time. So 24 volts is real common on conventional wires. It's just straight 24, but there's we get into more sophisticated electronics. You talk about sine wave and other things that are. I have marginal understanding.
I'm going to stop you for a quick sec, Dan. If you're being asked for this information for submittal purposes, or an engineer on a site wants to know, Chris has a link here to our website where we post this information in the tech specs. We have both the electrical requirements and then the output requirement or the output spec of the controller. as well. Right. So you have something you need to submit that is available. So this is the 3200 product page. And then Chris is going to the vacation of the controller. I think Chris, it was like maybe near to the last page, maybe page 6 or 7, something like that.
Yeah. So this is the full spec all the way down to the nth degree. Okay. Which isn't really something that is important to you when you're trying to trouble
output. There it is.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Okay. So 30 volts AC over 2-wire requires 120 VAC coming in, right? So that's the specification and the engineered capacity for it. And then in regards to stake or plate grounding, which do we prefer? The answer to that is that, depending on the site, and the location, are we able to use a ground rod, or do we have to use a plate because of constraints? Either way, or based on preference, we don't care. Right. We just want to make sure that when grounding is done, that we are at 25 ohms or less in a resistance test, right? Preferably 10 ohms or less.
So I'd say we care about the ohms of resistance. The project or the engineer or the consultant may care what is being used, because that might be their personal preference. But if all it takes, I'm making this up, if all it takes is a 5-foot ground rod to meet that, say 15 ohms, it's not that it's one plate or 2 plates or 2 rods or a plate and a rod. It's really just trying to obtain that resistance.
Yeah. The other thing that's part of our spec is the distance of that ground point from the wire path. That was the other thing that we're concerned about as well.
Yep. So if it's an 8-foot ground rod, then it needs to be 8 feet away from perpendicular from the wire path.
Correct. Right? Yeah. Yep. No closer than 8 foot. And then plates are basically take that diagonal distance, and that's the distance it needs to be from the wire path.
Yep. And typically that would be below if you're using a plate, because they often get installed in narrow planter beds or park strips or on green roofs or, other applications. All right. Very good.
All right, we got 8 minutes, just so timing wise. Wow, if we see a question that has a shorter answer, we should give it a shorter answer.
All right. Okay. Question 6, with regard to firmware upgrades, when will they be able to update themselves rather than at the controller? Or is this a feature already capable with the later firmware versions? Good question. So we have the ability to update controllers a couple of different ways. It is capable of updating over the air through the controller or through Base Manager. So we can request an updated firmware version virtually, if you will. And then it's also available manually with the USB thumb drive plugged into the controller. So I think the other real question is, auto updates. No, we don't auto update, and we likely will not.
Yeah, if you think about other consumer products that you interact with in your daily life, including your phone, typically there's a message and then you agree to the update versus it just happening like a Windows notebook.
Right.
Says the Apple guy.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and we have had times where we've taken this away. So if this question was asked while this capability was on hold because there was development happening on the back end, there are times when we have removed this access.
All right. Question number 7. I would like to learn more about the test results using Base Manager, more specifically 2-wire drop along a system. When I test a decoder, it gives me a 2-wire drop. What is a good range? Are we losing volts? Is it similar to water pressure drop along a pipe? So great question. Yep.
Yes, you're losing voltage, and it is. The water pipe is a great analogy. And it's going to be different for large systems, different for small systems. My little small systems I do for demo videos, it's a very low voltage drop or almost non-existent. When you get a really large wire path, or if you've exceeded the specifications on the wire run or in any way, the voltage drop will be an issue, and the controller will tell you that that's an issue. So I'd like to use it as a monitor health more than anything.
Yeah. I did check with tech support because I didn't know the details of this. And What they told me is under 4 is, sort of acceptable. Between 4 and 6 starts to be questionable. And above 6, you start to get communication failures. So you may do a test all and you may get sporadic, messages like can't communicate with device. And it could be a different device every time you test because there's so much voltage loss that we're losing the communication signal out there. And things like nicked wire, bad splices and such over time can cause that voltage drop to increase. Yeah. So like you said, Dan, health of the wire path over time can degrade. You can lose your wire path health over time. So if you, let's say, installed the site and you wrote down your 2-wire drop, maybe that's a good reference point. So a year later, 2 years, 3 years later, what's your voltage drop?
I like that.
Yep. So, and we're looking here. This is a snippet out of quick view of a 2-wire voltage drop of 2.89. I think if you get up around 5.5 or higher, then you're at risk of going into an overcurrent situation, right? Which would require you to find where that voltage loss is bleeding out and creating that short to be corrected so that you resume normal operation.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Question number 8. We have App Manager on our self-hosted server. Our software updates automatically sent to those of us who have purchased the self-hosted server option. So another good question. So auto updates are not available with server applications because we typically do not have access automatically to a self-hosted server. So it needs to be coordinated with IT administrator for that entity. And then, we need to be given access to that self-hosted server, whether it's an actual appliance or if it's a virtual machine that's on a partition server internally so that we can perform those updates.
Yep.
And then typically it comes with a SSA agreement, which is $1,500 a year as a subscription to have those updates and maintenance done on that server instance. Yep. All right. Question number 9, kind of a long one. Let's see. This is another good one for tech support assistance and documenting it and escalating it if needed. But for this one, after reading it, I would recommend that check what firmware version you are running on the controller, right? Because we've got statuses that are in conflict, and we know that we had some status indications earlier in the year that were not consistent from controller to server because of server issues that we were having that have been rectified. So I would encourage you to verify what firmware version that controller is operating on, and then work with tech support to get to a
that could
a
be
resolution.
Typically is one of the first things they do. So to save time, check your firmware version if anything wonky seems to be happening.
Yeah. All right. Question number 10. Where can I find a list of K values and pulses per gallon for 2-inch to 8-inch NetFM or Burmod hydrometers? Like how I said it, hydrometers. Hydrometers.
Yeah, it's funny because they actually say NetFM or Burmod. So technically we should go to NetFM and Burmod's websites to get this information. However, because our hydrometer, the baseline hydrometer is NetFM, Chris is bringing us to that page to show you where to find it. But if you're using a manufacturer's flow sensor other than baseline, you can get the K value from that manufacturer.
Correct. So with a baseline hydrometer, if you go to the flow sensor products page on the website, go under technical specifications, you can see there's a document here, K value and offsets for baseline flow meters and sensors. Click on that link and it opens up a nice PDF chart that lists all of the K values and offsets or pulses per gallon associated with those different size devices.
Yep. And at one point we were including something similar to this with the instructions in the decoder package. I can't recall if that's still happening today. Might be.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. All right.
Cool.
Very good. Question number 11. Oh, we're at the bottom of the hour.
Oh, it's okay. Let's give them. Let's give them some free minutes.
Okay.
Today.
One more.
All right. One more. Okay. How might dirty electricity affect the controllers? Need for filter or power conditioning transformer?
So
silence.
Well, it's kind of like, I would say it's site specific. So this is not a baseline requirement. You saw in the previous slide that we require 120. So if this site happens to have fluctuating power, this could be something that you look for to solve that problem. But it's not something I've never used one or experienced with it. But if you have a site that has dirty electricity, I guess this would be a way to solve that.
Yeah, and I don't think we immediately know. I don't think there's some really accessible test equipment to find out how clean your power supply is. And probably people in the IT world know better, but not really doesn't translate over to our side. That would be great if we had that.
And I can't think of a support instance. There could have been, but I can't think of one where this was the cause of a support incident.
Well, dirty power can create issues with the controller. If you do know you've got dirty power, then you need to rectify that with a licensed electrician. Right, it needs to be verified on site, because if you are operating with dirty power on your controller, it will have an impact on the performance of the controller and its reliability and longevity, etc. So if you do have dirty power and it's known, get it addressed with the licensed electrician, or use some of these products that are available third party to help condition that.
Yep.
Sweet.
So, all right. Awesome. Should we continue?
Well, I think there's only a couple left, right?
Yeah. What is new and interesting with the 1000 platform? So at this point, we just had a firmware release for the 1000 that creates some enhancements in communication protocol and networking, but does not add any additional features and or capabilities to the controller itself. And at this point, to be quite honest, there really isn't any engineering roadmap for the 1000 to make it more feature rich.
Yeah. It's still already far above its closest competitor, but what we're trying to do is move that 3200, beyond it. And so in order to do that, all the new and exciting stuff needs to go in that direction.
Yep. Question number 13. Who should I contact for assistance to properly set up a flow station? What documents are available for flow station setup?
I've got some documents and not a tremendous depth of knowledge. What I've kind of found in working with some of my setup videos is there's so many different uses for the flow station, so many different ways. It's like, where do I start? I'd say start with support. That is the place to work, to spend your time with support.
Yeah. And there's two parts to this question, because there's the specific need here of the flow station, but this question fits into a broader bucket of anything baseline related that might want, what's the right word? Baseline handholding, or baseline factory setup, or baseline, factory training, et cetera. So if that is a need of the site, whether it be the flow station, whether it be properly configuring the 3200 controller, or learning, soil moisture, learning flow, anything like that, we can help you. But it would require, an agreement or a service level, quote from baseline.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very good. Question 14. Is there a document that shows the minimum flow rate for the IDFS flow sensors? This is a flow product that we have that is a clamp-on flow meter. Those clamp-on flow meters are available in a wide range of sizes, from I think a 1/4 inch all the way up to 8 inch or larger. And it's just a clamp-on. It uses ultrasonic technology, so it will read very, very broad range of flows going through that pipe. So if you look on the website, same place in Flow, go to the tech spec for the IDF flow sensor, you will see that for different sizes, not all of the sizes It does show the flow range associated with them. But to answer that question, we really got to know what size flow sensor we're dealing with.
Probably small. If they're wanting minimum, I would say, what's the lowest? Maybe that would be, if we re-ask the question, you'd probably say, what's the lowest?
On the tech spec, we rate them maximum rated flow for all sizes. However, on the minimum flow, we rate it for 3-inch to 8-inch.
Right.
Okay. So if you've got one smaller than 3-inch, we'd have to dig into that. Or we can link you to a website that would give you that additional.
For general purposes, the IDFS will read a lower flow than an impeller style flow sensor. So it will read very, very low.
Yep.
Probably lower than is required, unless you're looking for like a droplet.
Yep. All right. And then I think there's one more that came in. You have been promising the Substation RV for over a year now. What is the holdup and when will it be available? So we haven't promised release of the RV for over a year. We've been talking about it for just over a year. Product is still making progress within engineering. It is about ready to go into beta test for a period, and we expect a product release on it early, in Q1 of 2022. Okay, so still very much in play, and we're excited for it to come to market. And then I think there's one more, because there's always one person in the community that wants to know boxers or briefs, and it really depends.
The response, though. Hey, it
depends on my mood. It could be panties. You never know.
I was going to ask if this
summer. Geez, that's why I asked for a third option, but I didn't get a response.
This is a family show.
All right, everybody. We have gone beyond our time. We appreciate your participation and your continued support of Baseline's Tech Talk Tuesday. Again, we feel like we're really building a community. We want to encourage that and continue to propagate that. So come back every week and join us, and hopefully we'll share useful information for you, and we will continue to innovate, develop, and support you all. So go out, have a great week, be safe, work hard, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Have
Cheers.
a good one.